Welcome to Real Talk, where I give real answers to real questions asked by real worship leaders. If you want your own question to be answered on a future episode, head over to leadingworshipwell.com/realtalk, and you might be on the next episode. Let's talk. First question of the day, and this comes from the Worship Leaders Plus community on Facebook. I'll link that down in the description below. So I have two singers on the team that were singing on the team last year before I got here. Sounds like we're going to have some inherited team members, always a big problem. Now they feel so confident that they're requesting to lead songs, and I have let one of them and received terrible feedback. She thinks it went well and can't wait to do it again. Personally, I would prefer if they didn't sing at all, as they sing out of pitch frequently and throw off the music. It makes it hard for me to focus, let alone the congregation. My heart is to provide a place for people to grow in their calling, and that the heart is more important than talent. However, there are others that disagree. I also am not a vocal coach and am mostly self-taught and really don't know how to help them other than encourage them to take vocal lessons, which they don't think they need. How do you handle situations like these? Also, serious question. I'm wondering what percentage of you guys request the sound team to turn down mics of the still growing background singers. So to sum up the question, you have worship team members that you've inherited from before you were there who should not be on the worship team, or at least should not have been allowed on the worship team in the first place, and they needed some more development beforehand. What do you do in that situation? Because it's completely different than asking someone if they want to join the worship team, or if they come to you and say they want to join the worship team, and then you realize that they aren't there musically yet. What do you do when somebody's already on the team? That's a tough question, right? Because you want to honor these people who have been serving. At the same time, we need to balance that with, I can anger two people and make the rest of my church happy. Or I shouldn't say that, but for the benefit of my church gathering. Which I think, if we look at the math, obviously that's the correct answer. You make two people mad, or you make 100 people uncomfortable during corporate worship. We are called to lead our church well, not just two people well. So we have to do what's best for the greater good. So I think you can see where my answer is leaning here. But how do you do it in a nice way? And I don't think that it is a instantaneous thing where we show up one rehearsal and we say, hey, listen, you are horrible at singing. You need to get off the worship team and never be here again, right? Like, that is not the appropriate response. As leaders, we guide people. And so how can you guide these people into either A, improving their singing, or B, not leading worship anymore because they aren't gifted at it? And I understand that you're trying to be like nice in this question, and you're like, I always understood that worship isn't about musical side of things. It's actually more about the heart. And like, that sounds good on paper, but it's also not true. Or I should say that with a caveat. Musical worship leading, that is not true. There are 100 different ways, 1 million different ways to lead worship, and it doesn't just involve singing. When we are called to lead musical worship, we are called to be musically gifted, at least to a certain degree, right? If you aren't gifted musically, then don't lead worship in that way. If I wasn't gifted at preaching, but I said, hey, you know what? I really want to talk on Sundays, even though I'm horrible at it, then I shouldn't be preaching on Sundays. If I'm not good with children, then I shouldn't be working in kids ministry, even if I want to, because I'm not good with kids, so I shouldn't lead worship in that way. Therefore, if I'm not good at music, I shouldn't be leading worship that way, because that's not how God has gifted me. So those are my thoughts behind like the softening of the blow, where it's like, yeah, it's not, it's not just about music. I understand that it's about our heart, but you minimize the view of what leading worship means whenever it comes to that. And why do we always apply that to, why do people who aren't gifted at something always want to be on the platform leading music and not doing anything else in the church? Like, we never hear these problems in other areas, and I think it's because being on stage is attractive for people, which is obviously wrong. So what do you do about it? First, I would do this. I would take a recording of our service where these people led. A lot of churches live stream now. If your church doesn't live stream, find a way to record them leading. And then at the next rehearsal, you say, I really want to focus on improving our musicianship as a worship team. And one of the best ways to do that is to hear ourselves. Oftentimes, these worship team members, they've never heard themselves before. I mean, that's true for a lot of musicians. They just play in their bedroom, practice in the car, and then show up on Sunday and sing and just go for it. But they've never actually heard a recording of them. So listen to a recording of your worship team and tell people, I'm going to ask you at the end of this, I want us to discuss what did we do well and what could we improve upon. And people will be naturally self-critical when they listen to the recording because we're selfish at our core. And so we're listening to ourselves and like, maybe these singers will realize that they sound bad. And maybe that's the jump start that they need. Maybe they legitimately don't know. Like you can tell them, but until they hear it for themselves, maybe they don't know. And then they can start working on it. Now, let's say that they don't get the hint and they are prideful and say, I sound amazing. At some point, as the leader on the team, you need to sit down with them for the health and benefit of your church gatherings and say, listen, I don't think you're quite there musically yet. I know you've been on the team for a while, but, listen to this recording, and just tell them, straight up, don't lie to them. Be like, your vocals are flat here. You aren't on pitch. You aren't blending with the other singers. These are things that we need to work on. And if they say, I'm not going to work on those, then you have to say, that's not the kind of team member that we're looking for. We're looking for people who are teachable. And so I need you to be on board with this and work on this, or else, you're not going to be able to be on the team anymore. That's a tough conversation to have. I'm not saying that it isn't, but for the benefit of your church, sometimes we have to, hurt one person, not intentionally, but it's not like we're being mean to them, but we have to do that for the benefit of our church. So sometimes you have to have a hard conversation. So that's what I do, have them listen to a recording. If they still don't get it, then we need to address them and be just very clear about it. Here's a quick question. Hi, all. Having a team morning this Saturday. I want to have some small group time. What are some great questions to be asking our team as we celebrate the last 12 months and plan towards the next 12 months? If you've watched my channel before, you know that I am an advocate for, during our devotional time, letting questions be the discussion and not just teaching people. So if you have a team time, or whatever they called it, on Saturday, you should be talking 30% of the time and let discussion be the content, because then you don't have to talk as much. You can lead your team well through asking the right questions. So let's talk about a couple questions that you can ask. If you are reviewing the past year, getting ready for another year, this is what I would ask. Number one, what can we celebrate from this year? As simple as that. Where did we see God moving in our worship ministry this year? And sit back and let there be awkward silence for a minute as people think. And you're going to get some amazing answers, things that you didn't even realize were happening, stories that you didn't even know God was working out in your church. So that's the first thing. We want to start with celebration. Number two, what can we do differently this year to improve our worship ministry? And this gives people a time to just share their opinions. I think we could do more songs about this topic. I think we should focus on the dynamics of our worship team. And this gets input from other people. And then you, as the leader, ultimately get to decide the direction of the ministry. But this is part of that, getting wise counsel from people, surrounding yourself with advisors. So ask that question, what can we do better? And a lot of it is going to be self-reflection. Some people will be like, you know what, I didn't do a very good job being prepared this year, so I need to be more prepared in the coming year. And then the last question that I would ask is, what can I do to serve you better this year? And I think this just comes from servant leadership and saying, I realize that I don't get everything right and I want to fix it this year, so what can I do to serve you better? And somebody might say, I need the songs further in advance, or I need sheet music instead of chord charts, and you can talk through whatever that looks like, whatever it looks like for your team. But you will hear what people need from you, and it's just a great leadership question to ask. And by the way, you don't have to wait to ask this question to your team. You can do it anytime. Like any worship rehearsal is a good time to ask those questions. And if you need a plan for your worship rehearsal, check out down in the description below a link to a free PDF I put together called the Worship Rehearsal Blueprint. In it, I will show you how to lead the perfect worship rehearsal that leads your team well spiritually, relationally, and musically so that they grow closer to God, grow closer to each other, and are prepared to lead on Sunday. So check out the Worship Rehearsal Blueprint down in the description below. Next question comes from the Worship Leader Collective Facebook group. It says this: got someone at our church that loves to give his opinion on the songs we praise the Lord with. He is over the top theologically and often tries turning his opinions into biblical truth. He often creates these little gossip groups to infect them with those opinions. We are a good-sized Hispanic Pentecostal church, and I am capitalized, sick and tired of him continuing on with this. He discourages me and my team, and even made me change songs on a Sunday morning because he didn't think it was theologically correct. No, I am not asking him to help me pick out songs and ask him to give me a list of songs he approves of. We make our programs with God in mind, having him lead us. I'm not concerned about his or anyone else's opinion on anything we do. I'd rather please God over any man every single day of my life. All right, we'll stop there. So basically, this person is asking you, or is disagreeing with the theology in the songs. First of all, I just want to give a warning because I heard it in that answer of like, and I understand where it comes from, but like to say, I don't care about what anybody thinks in my church, like let's rein that back a little bit, right? Like let's just show a little bit of humility. Like I understand that you're like, I just want to please God, which of course, but God has put the Holy Spirit in the people of your church. So like you aren't the sole arbiter of truth. Like people are encouraged in Scripture to think about the things being taught, the doctrine being taught in the church. So I understand the frustration though, and I understand sometimes we exaggerate in these situations. So just, do consider counsel from people in your church. But let's talk about the real problem that this guy does it every single week. You said, he made me change my songs on Sunday. Unless this person is my pastor, I'm not changing my songs on Sunday because some person in my church told me that they didn't like the songs. Like, how would they know that in the first place? I don't know. How would they know what songs you're doing? But listen, if you have addressed this problem with this person, this now becomes a pastoral issue. And I've heard these questions before from people, not this one specifically, but I've heard questions before where like these people ask questions and it's like, this is clearly a pastoral issue. And like, you need to take this to your pastor and they need to be the ones who deal with it. All right. Like that is the role of the pastor and the elders in your church, is to deal with things like this. So if you haven't told your pastor about this yet, take it to him and tell him like this is going on and it needs to stop, and hear what your pastor says about it. Like your pastor needs to support you in this, or you need to get your pastor's opinions on the songs. I've had it before where somebody's come up to me and it's usually like, we don't want to do Bethel or Hillsong songs. I'm sure you've got your own opinions on that. Leave them in the comments below if you want. But I do Bethel and Hillsong songs at my church. And there's people who disagree with that. But at the end of the day, like I know that my pastor doesn't have a problem with it. And so I will honor my pastor because he has been called to lead the church. And it's easy for me to honor him when I agree with him. And so I know that my pastor and I are in agreement. So you need to have your pastor on your side. And then you can just say, listen, I talked to the other leaders in the church. We believe that these songs are fine. And so we are going to continue to do them. And you're welcome to disagree, but I'm just telling you that we will continue to do them because that's what we've decided on as the leaders in this church. And like that is sufficient. And if you need to talk about specific points, then you can talk about specific points, but I'm not going to talk about the specific theological points over and over and over again every single Sunday if you aren't listening, right? Like I will tell you my opinion once, or my thoughts once, with the support of the other leaders in my church. And then from there, you've heard my position, and that's that. So just stand firm in your convictions as long as you have the support from other leaders in your church. And other than that, I mean, this needs to be dealt with, but probably not by you at this point. It needs to be dealt with by your pastor or other leaders in your church. Now, if you are a real worship leader with real questions and you want real answers, then head over to leadingworshipwell.com/real talk and submit your own questions there, and they might be on the next episode. Till I see you in the next video, keep leading worship well.